Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another game theory video. Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, comment, share. Support the channel if you want. Super chat, PayPal, super like, thanks, whatever the fuck it's called. You know, I was thinking more of another example. You know, we're talking about what is like a fuck neutral move. What is a neutral skip kind of move? You know, speaking of neutral, just in general. And you know, I've been using these examples of like Ryu versus Vega. But I thought, what about like an example of just something like Zangief versus fucking Ryu or Guile, right? Now take what I say with a grain of salt, because, you know, just take this with, you know, a very sort of like basic level. But even at a basic level, I think you should see what I'm getting at here if we're talking about neutral, right? We got two fireball characters, you could say. You could say Ryu is, you know, he has a fireball, dragon punch, whatever. Footsie, more footsie oriented if we're playing like an old school Ryu. Again, once you get to Super Turbo Ryu specifically is a little bit more versatile. You can augment his style a little bit, but the footsies get a little bit worse, but still fireball, dragon punch character, right? Guile, now Guile is a character that if I was to think about my definition, you know, I would not think of Guile as like a footsie character. I would think of Guile as a neutral character, right? Whatever the case, looking at this at face value, we think that, you know, a fireball, and of course, if you think about this classically, if we're thinking about, you know, Street Fighter, you know, Guile normally beats Zangief. Now, if we're thinking about a game like Super Turbo, although we both have these fireball moves, and maybe at face value, you would think that, oh, well, both Ryu and Guile should dominate Zangief, not just Guile, but if you think about Super Turbo, even a Japanese tier list that I was looking at recently had Zangief beats Ryu 7-3. Now this tier list was pretty extreme, like a lot of tier lists now are nowadays, and I think they kind of exaggerate things. But the point is, what I'm getting at is, although these characters are both kind of, let's say, in neutral, trying to fireball and keep Zangief out, let's say, you know, these characters actually, once they're, you know, they're neutral. Okay, like let's say Zangief's neutral. Zangief has his own neutral. Ryu has his own neutral. Guile has his own neutral. And then once these neutrals combine, they create a different neutral, right? So again, although at basic, you know, maybe at, you know, face value, you would think both characters maybe should dominate Zangief if you don't think about it too much. But, you know, there's, you know, I would say generally people are probably like, you know, Zangief might beat Ryu just by a little bit in Super Turbo, right? Both versions of him have different strength. One has bare footsies, but whatever the case is, there's an example of talking about neutral and fuck neutral, I think, because guess what? When you think about the neutral of fireballs, and I know that was a long forward, well, guess what? This is Zangief's fuck neutral move right here, isn't it? Isn't this, in a way, from a certain perspective, Zangief's neutral skip? Maybe, you know, normally Zangief isn't going to be doing lariat the whole time, but when you think of a character like trying to get through fireballs and all this kind of stuff, yeah, he's going to be lariating like a motherfucker, man. If you think about hyper fighting Zangief, you might be trying to, like, you know, double lariat, kick lariat through some of these lows, but, you know, let's just go with Super Turbo, whatever. Isn't that example, like, again, that's why I say when people talk about neutral and everything like that, neutral can be so vague and so ambiguous. From a certain perspective, you could say that Zangief's lariat in these matchups is a neutral skip. Do you see what I'm getting at? Because guess what? I got two fireball characters. Zangief spinning around. Are you not saying fuck my neutral? Are you not trying to neutral skip what I'm doing to you? And it's interesting, I think, as well, if you think about it, because again, classically, if you think about, you know, at least we're talking about more of a Super Turbo kind of thing, right? You know what I mean? And generally, Guile has always beaten Zangief, right? But, you know, we think of that, you know, Guile traditionally beats Zangief. We get to Super Turbo, man, like I said, this Japanese tier list, I was reading this recently, they actually says like a 7-3 matchup. Again, I think some of their takes are a little bit extreme, but, you know, it is what it is, right? So the point is, you know, you got two characters that are trying to keep Zangief out when they're, you know, both their respective neutrals combine, and one character wins, and the other character, he loses. You know. Isn't that kind of interesting, right? And if we're comparing this to newer games, right, if we're thinking about neutral, well, fuck, what do we think about this? And again, this is why I say take this with a grain of salt, because I'm not saying that, characters aren't different at all. I'm not saying characters aren't different at all in new games, because of course they are. Characters have their own special moves and whatnot. Of course, there's homogenization in that. But if we think about like a new game, well, guess what? What would be the fuck neutral move when we think about new games? What move kind of disrupts my little game plan? What move contributes to my game plan maybe? And it might just be like, oh, well, fuck, I did a spinning pile driver with Zangief. And now maybe in an old school game, after I do a spinning pile driver and I knock you down, maybe when I try to get in, I maybe do a green hand or I do some other normal to try to work my way back in during the neutral. But now in a game like Street Fighter 6, guess what? Oh, I knocked you down? Oh, I'm slimering in. Oh, I'm just going to randomly slimer, get my plus frames, right? But this is the thing when you think about Street Fighter 6, and again, I know I'm trying to think about this at a basic level, but even at a basic level, you can make it a little bit deeper if you're thinking about it. Everyone uses the meter almost in a seemingly homogeneous way, right? Because the meter is so important, right? It's always Slimer, right? Slimer, 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 right? Of course, there's a little bit, I shouldn't say always, quotation marks always, right? We got Drive Impact, there you go, Drive Impact. Could you not say that Drive Impact is kind of a fuck neutral move? It's a neutral skip move. Could you not say that parry? You could say parry and neutral. Is that not your neutral skip move? If you're thinking about it from a certain perspective, could you not say that maybe parry is a form of neutral skip? Is a form of fuck neutral? And these characters all have this same tool. They all have the same viable, tool in neutral. If we're thinking about old school Street Fighter, we don't have the same tools in neutral. All the characters are different. I know someone's going to be like, oh, well, we all have normals, we all have throws, you know what I mean? Oh, these characters both have fireballs. But that's why I'm saying it. Even though both these characters have fireballs, guess what? One character wins, one character loses. Right? It's funny too. Like I said, I always think it's funny when people try to argue me about video games or whatever like that. Like that one guy recently about custom combos, like, oh, Clayton, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks custom combos are good in Alpha 2. Custom combos are just like tick throws, which, oh my God. Right after he said that, my brain, I kind of was about to Persona 3 myself. Oh my God. But then he went to say like, oh, custom combos, it's not homogenized. Custom combos isn't a win condition for characters because guess what? Maybe, I want to use custom combos here. And then the next character's going to use custom combos here. And that character's going to use custom combos this. This character's going to use this custom combos anti. And I'm like, you just fucking said all the characters are going to use a custom combo. You just fucking proved my point. Like, are you fucking retarded? And again, that's not to say that, old school Street Fighter doesn't have its problems or, old school Street Fighter isn't archaic in certain aspects because of course, old school Street Fighter has problems. Of course, legitimate problems, right? Of course, Street Fighter has, problems, you could say problems, quotation marks, that it is an archaic game and games need to progress, right? So, of course, progression must be had. But so many of these fundamental things are the problems with games. Fundamental, simple things. Characters becoming homogenized. Street Fighter 6, again, it's not necessarily bad that, the idea of having a Street Fighter where, a tug of war system, like I talk about, it's an interesting potential perspective on fighting games, but it's just done so badly because the characters are so homogenized in so many ways. And the characters so often use the meter in a same similar way, right? Again, certain aspects of the tug of war are interesting. The fact that, I mean, God, there's a thing. I'll never understand how you can have a game where you can parry everything and block damage is not. I don't understand how there isn't more block damage in fucking Street Fighter 6 when you have a fucking parry mechanic. I'll never fucking understand that kind of bullshit. I gotta wait till I break your fucking meter. Like, that shit's retarded, but, again, and like I said, Street Fighter Alpha 2 is the first game where the system more important than the characters almost, it seems like, where the system is the focus, right? Again, I said, oh God, sometimes when I read some of that shit, custom combos are like tick throws. I'm like, God, these are the people you haters think can argue me. This is the best you can do. I have to. You want me to respond to this when that was the initial sentence? It might have been a second sentence. It could have been a second sentence. But anyway. So anyway, the point of this was, again, talking about neutral skips, fuck neutral, all this kind of thing. And I've generally been using this Ryu versus Vega example because I think it's interesting, right? Because Vega's definitely a character that you think of when characters say, oh, he's a fuck neutral character. He's a fuck footsie character. And I've said, maybe he's a fuck footsie character because his footsies, quotation mark, isn't good. Right? If we're thinking about the neutral of, Ryu, Guile, Zangief, look at how these neutrals combine into their own form of neutral. And two different characters win, right? Anyway, remember if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. The end.